So what's up, everybody? We're here with Green Pastures Farm intern. They're going to explain this to you guys in a little bit. Ben and Isaac. They've been working with Greg Judy now for almost a year. Is that right?
Yeah, 11 months. Yeah.
Wow. That's a dream come true for a lot of people that watch Greg daily. You know, that's one of the first things I do every morning before I go out check my cows is go watch one of Greg's videos and go, okay, I mean, how can I implement this on my system? And you guys are really lucky for that. So explain to everybody, we're just explaining to me about what your guys' role is with Greg and how that came about.
Yeah, you wanna?
Yeah. So last April in 2020. Me and Ben came on here to the farm as interns here at Green Pastures Farm. Then we were set as we were going to be staying on for a full year, learn what we can, doing the normal internship. And then in around October time, Greg and Jan came up and offered both of us the opportunity to stay on another year. So we will be finishing in the 2022 around April time as quasi intern / apprentices
or it's never been done before, so there's no like official title. You're like interns with experience.
We're kind of flying by the seat of our pants, so to speak.
Yeah, because we're bringing on another intern actually at the end of the month. So there'll be 3 of us. Yeah.
Cool. So you guys, what's your guys' background? Let's start with Ben on this one. You guys have a farming background, or is it, tell us a little bit.
Yeah. So I worked on farms in high school a little bit. I'm originally from Massachusetts, and so it was more just like I really love spending time outdoors. Like I love backpacking, downhill skiing, hiking, running, like fishing, like that kind of stuff. And I've always loved nature and spending time outside. And so it was more in high school, it was more like, a way to like make a little bit of money and like, get to be outside and work with my hands and like that kind of stuff. And so that was really all it was. I was just, working on a vegetable farm here and there, maybe like a couple pigs or chickens, but like no real livestock. And that was the extent of like my farming experience, because it's not super prevalent, like where I'm from. And then I went to college and I studied environmental science in college in upstate New York. And that was more just, just trying to give myself a lot of options because I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had no intentions really of going into agriculture. I thought maybe I'd go into forestry or something like that, but something where I didn't have to work at a desk and be able to be outside as much as I could. And then somewhere along the way, I ran into like, the concept of regenerative agriculture. And I started reading about that on my own. And then the stuff that I was learning in school, like stuff started to become sort of applicable from an environmental science standpoint, as far as the whole like regeneration of ecosystems and building soil and whatnot. And so it just became like a win-win in my mind for like, in a lot of different respects, a win-win for me personally, because I get to spend time outside. I get to, interact with nature and like help repair ecosystems and it's like, and it's super engaging. And then the other aspect, which is like the silver bullet, so to speak, of being able to feed people as well as healing ecosystems, through using livestock as a tool. And so at the end of my time in college, I was trying to like take as many courses as I could that would sort of relate to it. And that's when I decided to apply to the internship for Greg's place here, which I had found like way before he had a YouTube channel. He had this old website. You couldn't even find the internship. You had to like click through like a back door to get in there and like find the page with the information on it. And I was like, it might be kind of interesting, like later on down the road, but I wasn't really thinking more than that. And then when I graduated, it was like, I got to give this thing a shot. And so I applied and went through that whole process. And then was lucky enough to be selected, and here we are. And it was one of the best decisions I've made in a long time. So that's awesome. Sort of my background in a nutshell.
Wow.
Yeah.
Isaac, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Michigan, southern Michigan, right on the Indiana border. I grew up in a small town. High school, I had like 88 kids in my graduating class.
Wow.
grew up, my dad has 40 acres and we raised our own pigs and chickens for meat. And then we also hunted. And so we didn't buy any meat from the grocery store. Everything we ate, we raised on our, our land. So that like growing up like that kind of, instilled that in me of like wanting to know where my food's coming from and, how it's raised and everything. And then, probably when I'd always had this idea that I kind of wanted to be a farmer because I love the outdoors. I love animals, and it just kind of fit with what I wanted to do. And so probably around like, I was like in 7th grade or something, one of my uncles, he does rotational grazing. Was the he showed me that, and that was like my first like into this whole regenerative culture, farming and stuff. And so like I think Joel Salatin was in that documentary, and so I watched that, and it kind of started that spark inside me for wanting to do things different, and so just like through YouTube and books and stuff, it's like a big snowball. Once you get it started, it just grows and grows and grows. So
first night I learned about it, I was up all night.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, what was it? It'd be my senior year, or maybe the summer of my junior year or something. I came across Greg's YouTube videos, or no, it was Justin Rhodes' Great American Farm Tour, where he came and he went to Greg's farm and looked at the cattle. I'm like, man, that guy's got some good looking cattle. It'd be cool to go there. Yeah. He seems like he knows what he's doing. And then he started, he had his own YouTube channel, and like right when his was starting was when I started to kind of follow along. And I was what you would call a YouTube, what was it? Like, yeah, follow, like I watched every video, and so then I was like, man, it'd be kind of cool to apply to this. I graduated high school in 2019.
Oh, wow.
And so that summer I applied and, started that whole process, and I got accepted and came here in 2020. I did a year of community college, just business classes before I came, but I had held like farming jobs. Like I worked at a pumpkin farm in high school. I did a lot of, mowing lawns and stuff. I actually worked for my junior and senior year, the summer between my junior and senior year, and then the summer after my senior year, I worked at a sire service. So we collected semen, and shipped it out all over the United States. So that was, that kind of taught me a lot of cattle sense and like how to work with, big animals like that. Cause I hadn't really had that experience before that, but it was an interesting job. That's for sure.
Wow. That's so not too much farming background for either of you, especially on the regenerative side. You guys basically learned at least, the grazing part from Greg mostly. Is that correct?
100%. Yeah.
So if somebody is watching this and they want to, start getting involved, they say they're ready to do something. Okay. They might have a little bit of money saved up. They don't know whether they should buy land, rent land. Where would they start? Where would you suggest someone that said, okay, they're in your position, maybe a year and a half ago? What would you say to them?
I think the first piece is to get educated. And I think that can come in a variety of forms depending on like how you learn best. I mean, for me, like reading and YouTube was a big part of that. And that's how I found Greg. And how I learned about the whole regenerative thing. Because by the time, for both of us, by the time we applied for the internship, we didn't know a lot about you think you know a lot because you've read a bunch and you've watched a lot of stuff, but then you come here and it's like a whole other ball game. But at least just getting that base knowledge, you're just familiar with, sort of like the alphabet, so to speak. Yeah, exactly. Like the principles and sort of understand how it works. But I would say just get educated however you can. And then depending on what your situation in life is, I think finding a mentor of some kind, whether that's working for somebody for free, doing an internship like we're doing, like invaluable, like hands-on experience after you get that base education, I would highly suggest it.
If you're a hard worker and you're passionate about what you're doing, you know, you're going to have a lot of success in this industry. You know, you're able to, like, people recognize when someone is, you know, passionate about something and putting a lot of effort into it, and they're going to, you know, reward you for that, or you're going to get a lot of benefits from doing that. And so, you know, just keep that in mind too.
Yep,
when you're
absolutely
when you're wanting to work for somebody or intern or anything like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So interning is probably the best way to go, because that's what you guys did.
It's the way that we like to sort of, or the way that I like to sort of think about it is like, there's always between like along this whole like regenerative journey, if you want to call that, there's always like a leap that you're going to have to make, you know, if you want to call it that, to starting your own operation or doing your own thing or whatever.
Like a risk,
there's always like a leap you're going to have to, something you're going to have to jump. You're eventually going to have to jump into it and do it, right? And so, like, obviously, the ultimate goal would be to make that gap as small as you can, so the jump is going to be as safe as possible. And so, like, the more, it's not that you can't do it without doing an internship. It's just that the internship, you know, narrows the gap more than just, you know, reading and watching YouTube and that kind of stuff. But you can still do it. Mm-hmm. And the hardest part is just making that leap. Like, I mean, it's still pretty daunting for us, even because, like, I mean, we've learned so much in a year, and we're still gonna, you know, get a lot more repetition next year and learn some more things. But like, there's still gonna be that, like, you know, man, like we're really going for it, like when that next step actually happens. So but yeah, I would, like, the scariest part is starting, but I mean, for my own like risk management self, I would try to make that gap as small as possible, you know.
And if you're focused on the right things, you know, you've got, like, even if you're not able in your life in a position to intern or do something like that, if you're like following the right people or listening to the right advice trying on your own, you're still going to be so much more successful than someone that's just, you know, flying in the dark. So yeah.
Well, it's like, it's what it sounds like you're saying is what Tony Robbins says, and that's find somebody who has what you want, do the same thing, expect the same result. Is that sound about right to you guys?
I was just going to add to it that like the thing to remember when you're, I mean, trying to emulate somebody is always really important because they've got a model that works. But something that, like, we've talked about before on the stuff that, like, we do is that you need to, like, know yourself before you start jumping into this kind of stuff, because, like, know yourself and know your situation, because, you know, running South Pole cattle at like 350 head, you know, the way that Greg does, if you live somewhere completely different, or you don't enjoy working with cattle, or you have zero experience with it, is probably not a great idea. So like, it's like, yes, you want to be like learning from people who are trying to do what you want to do, but at the end of the day, like, you have to make it your own, for a lot of different reasons, you know, like for your own enjoyment as well as like the success of your business. So
because there's no two businesses are going to be exactly alike, and you've got to morph your business to fit you as a person.
And because we're in the land business, like, you know, it has to be tied to the ecosystem that you find yourself in, you know. So with a lot of different, I mean, the whole management style, breed selection, all that kind of stuff is a reflection of you, your market, and your land.
So let me ask you this: you guys work with the South Pole cattle and the St. Croix sheep, okay? If you guys were to go back to Michigan and Massachusetts and say you wanted to start your own farm, what animal would you start with?
That's you want to answer?
Yeah. I would. It's a tricky situation because there's elements to where South Pole, you know, like Greg's cattle or like if you would like use his bulls, I mean, you're going to be so much farther ahead than most bulls that you could ever buy on the market. But that being said, too, Michigan is a totally different climate than here in Missouri. And so it's going to take quite a jump for those animals to get adapted to that environment. And some of them just may never get adapted.
Okay, then let's word it like this: sheep or cattle? Which way would you go?
It depends on again,
there's a lot of variables.
It's like, if you, I think one of the biggest things, I mean, market is one big thing. Like, if you have the capacity to sell sell your sheep, if you're planning on doing mostly for meat, or if you're planning on doing it mostly for seed stock, you need to make sure that you have an ability to sell sheep. The big advantage in those two environments with sheep is the fact that you can do it on really small acreages.
Yeah.
So,
and with limited capital to start out.
Exactly, because like Greg's stuff is top of the market, and it's still only like a couple $100 per animal, as opposed to a couple $1,000 per animal. So and like the rate at which they reproduce is also a lot faster, so your cash flow is a lot better when you start out. But I mean, sheep are really intriguing and like I would think for somebody who's a complete beginner and doesn't know what they're doing, I think sheep are a great option, just because there's a lot of risk that gets mitigated with sheep, as far as financially, like physical risk to yourself, because if you get knocked over by a 150-pound ewe, you're probably going to be okay. But if you get knocked over by a 1,000-pound cow, like you might not be okay. So it's like, and I mean, obviously, like, cattle, it's not like cattle are dangerous, but it's it's just something to think about if you have no experience. But I would say, I don't know. I mean, for Massachusetts, I think probably sheep would be a good idea, just because of the limited land availability. And to be clear, like, I'm not actually planning on going back home. I know it was just an example, but it's just not like specifically where I'm from, it wouldn't make sense. Like land prices are way too high. There's way too many people. It'd be a tough go.
Well, I moved from LA in California out to East Texas.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but like for Isaac, it's like a super relevant question, because that's something that he's been thinking a lot about.
Kind of directed home a little bit as in my goals. I think, me personally, I would probably try to start with the cattle. If I had a nest egg saved up enough that I could make the jump. If I'm kind of stressed on capital, or I don't have huge funds to draw from starting out, I think sheep are like a really good way to start up. For like you talked about, like the financial and the risk factor, but it's also, they're a lot hardier than cattle, and they can take a lot more abuse, or like poor land or poor management. Like they can survive on some pretty poor forage, whereas a cow, she kind of needs good nutrition and keep her body and her calf going, and so I would say if someone was starting out, like you said, just complete newbie, sheep for sure.
Sheep are such a good idea.
Now I think someone else starting just completely out too. Okay, when it's a different situation for everybody. Like when we were moving out here to East Texas, I wanted to buy land because I wanted to buy a house. I wanted to, be able to get settled. Didn't really have anywhere to just rent because I didn't know the area. If someone is in that situation, or even knows the area, knows everything really well, what would you say for them to do? Would you say rent land, or would you say buy land? And then how much money do you think it would take to start up a small scale operation in order to make it viable, to make it somewhat worth it for people to get into? If, somebody looking to save money, okay, I have, around this amount, how much do you think you would say they need just to start it part-time?
There's a lot to unpack there. I would say, like, obviously, starting, like, if we just address the land piece as far as like renting versus owning to start with, I think like owning is always the ultimate goal, because like, even if you have security for security of your, hold on, it's the dryer. Sorry about that. But I think owning is like the ultimate goal for a lot of reasons. Like, it's security of your land, and you don't have to be, because even the best lease could get pulled out from underneath you with a weird circumstance. Even if you really know the person, and whatever, like, stuff happens, and you could lose that. And so like, owning's the ultimate goal, but obviously owning requires a ton of capital in order to make like an operation work to support you. You could do it on small acreages. It's just you have to get super creative with layering enterprises in order to do it. But the leasing obviously is there's a huge advantage, because you don't need a ton of capital to start doing that. and you can get access to a lot of land than you otherwise would be able to. But the tricky piece is like being able to do it, because we've learned like from Greg's situation that like his leases, it's all like relationship based, as in like you really got to know people and work those like landowner relationships, be talking to people and always sort of scheming like where maybe you could be leasing like a couple acres here, a couple acres there, and it just takes time to accumulate all that kind of stuff. But once you get it, if you're able to work that out, it's a huge advantage to be able to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
But again, it just depends on how much capital you've got and what area you're in, and if there's land available to lease, because it's not easy. Like that's a big criticism that we hear from people. It's like, well, I'm not like Greg. I don't have like abandoned land everywhere that I can lease. Like, people are cropping it or whatever. And that's a big problem. I mean, for you, it's a big problem,
for me back home, it's like, it's either row cropped or it's swamp.
Yeah.
There's nothing in between.
It just drives the land prices up.
So it's like a lot. Yeah, it's something to definitely. It's a challenge to overcome. But.
Yeah, and then the financial piece of it. I mean, we've worked on we worked with Greg on a bunch of consulting projects, and so we've done a lot of the back end like spreadsheet work as far as like how much it's going to cost to start something or whatever. So, but obviously we can't really like get into like that kind of like detail, but I think it's you can start as simply as you as simply as your means are. You know what I mean?
I would say starting out, you need to create a budget and determine what you need personally to live on, like what you feel comfortable with living on, and then you've got to adjust your business to make that, because if you're not able to provide for yourself, you're not going to be able to keep that business running. So like that's got to be kind of the starting point, I guess. And then the numbers wise, like depending on your market, depending on your your land, your cattle, like there's a lot of variables that go into it. But if you can get it to where your profit coming in is what you need, and maybe a little more that you could put back into the business, that's you're going to be doing good there.
The thing that I will say though is like, if with the model that like Greg has developed, as far as the kind of infrastructure that he uses in his style of sort of overarching style of management, which obviously varies from place to place depending on what you're doing. Like the first time we put together like a spreadsheet as far as how much it actually cost to start an operation from scratch, like no fencing, no water, no livestock, no nothing. This was in an extremely arid environment, but still, it's like it was shocking to me how cheap it actually was for the
like 140 acres.
Yeah,
it was like
140 acres, and it was
under 50,000, but that wasn't including the cattle.
No, it wasn't including the cattle, but the things that you should really be concentrating on, I guess a good way to approach it would be like the things to concentrate on when you start, right, would be livestock, fence, and water. Yeah. And so if you can just break down each of those things, where it's like, okay, what do I really need for my fence? What do I really need for my water? And what do I really need for my livestock? And so it's like, make sure you got a good perimeter fence, and then make sure you got like some sort of watering system, whether that's surface water, gravity flow, pressurized, like that kind of stuff. And then your livestock is really where you should be putting the most of your money, because that's the stuff that's going to make a return on your investment. Like you shouldn't be worrying about building barns or corrals or a lot of like permanent infrastructure starting out, because like that's just going to eat up your capital. Mm-hmm. Like don't be building swales or trying to like do all sorts of like this dig ponds and like all this cool infrastructure stuff. You could start to incorporate some of that like later on down the road, but you really just got to be lean and mean in the beginning and be concentrated on getting
what's going to make you money.
Yeah, what's going to make you money, getting good quality livestock on your land and be able to keep them there, be able to water them, and then your feed is taken care of by what you got. So
fencing, water, and animals.
Yep, that's the important stuff for sure. For sure.
Bare bones.
Yeah.
Greg has basically one barn on the farm.
It's not even really a barn. It's like a shed.
It's like a pole shed over a working facility.
Yeah.
Or like a chute system.
He'll tell people like
the hay barn.
Go like drive down the road. We're going to meet somebody who's picking up a bale and roller or something. Be like, drive down to this address. You'll see a pole barn on the right with a tractor. And it's like, people don't stop because they don't think it's a barn. It's just like a shed, but it's his barn. So it's sort of, so he'll call it. Yeah.
But I mean, it kind of goes to show that you really don't need like the thought of, oh, we need to build all these things. You really don't need that to be successful in this business. So it's kind of, I mean, for, I don't know, 15 years, Greg didn't even own a tractor.
Yep. That's very recent. Yeah. So yeah. And you can see, like, when Greg started out, he started with literally no money. Mm-hmm. Like I think he had $8 in his bank account. Like that kind of stuff. And so you can see remnants of like the old equipment and stuff that he used to use that's still in existence in certain aspects. But then as the business grew, he was able to like update certain pieces of it. And so you should really, and he just relied a ton on his creativity in the beginning and like the resources he had available to him and his sweat equity in order to make it work. And so that's sort of the mentality. If you don't have a lot of capital, that's what you need to do to start. If you do have a lot of capital, hire somebody who knows what they're doing, at least as a consultant, to come in and tell you, like, this is what you need to be using for this watering system. This is what you should be doing for your grazing plan. And it'll save you. You spend like a couple $1,000s on a consulting fee, it'll save you like so much headache and money, like in time lost, down the road. So it's something to think about too.
That's smart. That's very smart. Now, money, that's one of the biggest obstacles. And another thing is people say it takes too much time. So you guys run a big operation there. Everybody following Greg on YouTube, they see maybe 10, 15 minutes of your guys' day. Do you think you can take us through a day, what it's like to work with Greg, and kind of tell us your, what a typical day looks like? I know it's all different, but, what time do you guys start? What time do you guys end, kind of thing?
Yeah, so my alarm goes off at 6 o'clock in the morning. Wake up, relieve myself, go to the kitchen and start making breakfast. And we get around, and we meet down there at 7:30 in the morning down at Greg's house. So we live in a trailer up above Greg's place, and then they live down the driveway. So we were right here on the farm. If anything goes wrong, we're right here if he needs us. And so that's like super huge. We get there 7:30. First thing we do is we go to the mob. We call it the mob, which is all the cows, calves, the herd, and we'll move them. Either we'll move them on their paddock, or we'll give them hay, depending on the time of year and everything. That usually takes, it's very dependent, but anywhere from an hour to all morning. So depending on if things go wrong or not, but usually let's say 2 hours, and then maybe by 9 o'clock, 9:30, we'll go and we'll move the sheep. We only move the sheep every other day. But like in the growing season right now, it's a lot less than that. But we still go and check on them every day or two, because we've got a lot of guard dogs in there right now.
We're raising guard dog puppies. But anyway.
We'll go to the sheep, and then usually by the time that they're done, it's like 10 o'clock, 10:30, maybe about 10:30. We're done with the sheep, and right now, so we have the bulls sorted off right now because we're in that period of time where we don't want them breeding, because we'll have winter calves. And so now we've got the bull chores to do too. And so we either move them or give them a bale. And so I would say usually by 10, 11 o'clock, we're usually done with chores. And so then we work on like little projects, or do
set up fence,
like the sawmill, or set up fence, or things like that. And we usually take lunch around noon, 12:30, 1 o'clock, somewhere in there. It's about an hour lunch usually. After lunch, usually we'll have some kind of little project we're doing, whether, like I said, that's temporary fencing around a pond permanent. Like there's a lot of different things we do, obviously, on the farm.
Sometimes, when it was really cold recently, you guys got a ton of snow down in Texas, but we had like negative 25-degree temperature or whatever up here. Mm-hmm. And so like you can't really be outside for a long length of time when it's that cold. And so like, afternoon projects for us, when we were inside, we have a ton of sales that we're working like logistically through this summer. And so it was just coordinating a lot of that stuff on the back end. So sometimes we do computer work, but most of the time we're outside doing stuff.
And then usually around 4 o'clock, we go back out to the cow mob, and we'll, move them again, do chores in the evening. Sometimes it's a little later, sometimes it's a little earlier.
I'd say the range is like we're done anywhere between, at the earliest would be like 4:30, and the latest would probably be like 7:30. Like in the summertime. I mean, obviously in the winter when it gets dark.
Yeah,
I mean,
we're done by 5.
We're done when it gets dark.
Yeah.
But in the summer, especially in the heat of the summer, I mean, like it gets, for us, like northern dudes, it was really hot here in the summertime, and so it was like our schedule changed in the summer because the animals don't like moving when it's hot as well. So we'd move them a lot earlier, like an hour earlier, and then we'd move them like an hour later than we usually do. And so we were getting up really early, and then we'd be done really late. But then we had like a 2.5-hour lunch in the middle of the day, like to make up for that like time on the ends. And so, you just sort of restructure it based on the time of year, but that's pretty typical. And then the weekends are different. Greg likes to give us time off on the weekends, so we'll basically just do chores and then that's it. So we do our 2 hours or whatever in the morning of moving stuff around, and then we're off until about like 4 o'clock when we go and move stuff again, and that's when we get to go get groceries, clean the house, chill out, go fishing, go hiking, whatever kind of like stuff that we want to do in the middle of the day. But I mean, we're working 7 days a week. It's just a little bit lighter on the weekends, and like
sometimes we have a full Saturday or a full Sunday depending on what's going on.
Yeah, if something goes wrong, like we could work
or
like
if we have
until lunch,
customers come in or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Your chore time between the morning and the evening to move almost 400 cattle, and then roughly around 100 and something, 200 sheep.
Yeah, 160.
Right?
Yeah,
about 4 hours total each day. Is that a good approximate?
Maybe.
Yeah, that'd be like a max.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the cattle takes 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I think our like from truck to truck, our guys, like when we got out of the truck to when we got back in the truck, I think it's like the shortest was like 15 minutes. It's probably the fastest it's ever been. And that's moving like 400 head. So, but I mean the longest sometimes we'll be there for hours if something's going wrong, like a calf needs attention or something like that.
But yeah, if you got it set up, which that 15 minutes that he was talking about, that was because we had the paddocks already set up. So all we did, we got there, rolled up the wire, they moved across, and we left.
Yep.
We checked the water, mineral.
You're checking them too. You're keeping an eyeball for anything that looks
and then you're good.
Out of place. But yeah, it's pretty cool because people always say like, oh, it's way too much work to move cattle twice a day. And it's like, it's really not more work. It's just different. You're just readjusting the amount of work you're doing. Mm-hmm. It's like, we don't work any more than a lot of people who raise livestock. It's just, we work on different things. Like we're not firing up a tractor and going and like getting one of those shredders, whatever they're called, like, grind up feed and like, go and pour it to the cattle and like that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But we don't have to move them if you do that. But it's like, or you could spend that time going and setting up paddocks and then you're actually
enjoying the sunshine. And the green grass and the blue skies.
Yeah. So it's not like more or I mean, in a lot of respects it's less work, but it's really not more work. It's just,
I would say it's less work.
It's just honestly adjusted.
Well, working at the sire service, we took care of animals, and we had probably 40 head, and it took the same amount, which we were doing different things too.
Yeah, it's not a regenerative sire service.
Right. Well, and it's not. We weren't doing beef; we were doing semen. But anyways, I worked harder there, not harder, sometimes longer hours there than we work here, just because, baling hay or doing other things like that, like stuff that we don't really focus on here. We do a lot every day, but it's like the same thing every day, and it's a more, I guess, controlled.
And the work schedule is also like adapted to the way that like we run the farm with Greg now. Like when Greg was working 40 hours a week in town, he did not move his animals the same way that he does now. He was just structuring it. I think he was still moving them twice a day, but he had like 5 different herds, but like because he was separating out heifers and bulls and like that whole one herd mentality. He hadn't really gotten to that point yet. But anyway, I mean, he was going out in the dark before in the wintertime to go like move animals, like before you went for work, speed off to work all day, come back, move the animals in the evening. And then when he incorporated sheep, the sheep was, I can only move the sheep on the weekends. That was the only way that he can incorporate sheep when he was still working in town. And now it's every other day. So it's like
on the weekends, you would set up all the paddocks that you have for the week, ahead of time, so that
for the cattle,
you just roll up a wire. But if something went wrong, like a cow's having trouble calving or something,
or a tank gets busted or something like that,
it was hard for him.
Yeah, but if you setting it up ahead of time saves a lot of time. But I guess sort of the point I was trying to make is like, we do it one way, but you can adjust it to fit your life and like your work schedule. And that's like a hugely important thing, because if you're doing something that's incredibly strenuous on you on a daily basis, you're just going to burn out eventually. So you got to make a schedule that fits your life. And obviously it's better in a lot of respects to be moving your animals more often, but at the end of the day, if you stop moving your animals because you don't like it anymore, that's worse than moving them like every 2 days.
It's better for us if we move the cattle every 30 minutes, but we can't make that work. So there's always something better, but you just got to do what you can and recognize that what you're doing good, even though it's not maybe as
ideal as you would like.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe someday you can get to that ideal that you'd want to be at, but
yeah.
Do you find that there's a big difference between moving the cattle once a day and twice a day? Because right now I'm only doing once, and I'm thinking about doing twice because it can be, the way I have it is really easy. What would be is there that much more of a benefit to do it twice?
So you got to think about it like this: when a cow goes into a paddock, she's taking the best first. She's taking the candy out of the paddock, and so as time goes on, that the quality of the forage that she's eating is going down. But when you're moving when you're moving them once a day, it's still, once a day is really good. Like very few people, cattle farmers do that in the United States. And if more people just moved them once a day, we'd solve so many problems. But if you think about it, so a full day, the time that they're in the lower quality is longer. Whereas if you're moving half a day, it's like shorter little, like you'd have a little short spike and then better quality, then poor. Whereas the full day would be a little bit longer. So it's kind of, if that makes sense, if I could draw it out, but that's kind of how I would describe it,
So they can get more of the better quality grasses.
And as a result, right, because they're spending less time in a given area, like you give them half the area that you would be giving them for a whole day as far as like paddock size. And so you're increasing your stocking density every single day with the same amount of animals, which is stimulating your soil biology a lot more than, because your density is higher, even though you have the same amount of animals, because you're moving them,
they're getting the same amount of forage, but they're getting it a smaller amount in for less time, or the same amount, but it's shortened the time.
And we're talking about like the growing season also, because like right now, sometimes our protocol, depending on where we're at in a farm, we'll move them in the morning, and then we'll feed hay on the same spot that they're on. And so like we're effectively moving them once a day, you know what I mean? But like the feed availability is really a half day. But anyway, like sometimes we move them once a day, but I would say the vast majority of the time it's twice a day. And you're going to see benefits as far as like the land, like the impact that the animals have on the ecosystem. You're going to see benefits in that regard. You're going to grow more grass and better plant density, but also from an animal performance standpoint, you're keeping the rumen biology like constantly in that high plane of nutrition. And so the issue, right, when like for a nutrition standpoint, if you were to not move them for 5 days, is like Isaac was saying, that forage quality decreases and decreases and decreases, and they're in there long enough that their bugs in their gut are now changing because they have to consume.
Like if you give them an area for 5 days, which is the same amount of forage.
Yeah.
The first day they have just primo grass, and they just stuff themselves. The second day, it's still really good. It's just a little less quality. The third day, now you're talking like kind of middle of the road. Fourth day, they're solely on poor forage. Fifth day, it's like they're scrounging, and so like their gut, like you said,
it completely changes.
It's thrown, in this like cycle of,
and then when
like back like good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. And
exactly.
How long does it take for the rumen to adjust? It's like
I think it's like
2 weeks.
Oh wow.
2 days. But basically, like if you're able to continually, if you're able to keep the quality of forage that they've got as constant as possible, they're going to be healthier because their gut is adjusted to it. Whereas if you go from poor to high quality, their bugs in their gut are not adjusted to that. So then they're not really performing to the level that they should be with the plane of nutrition they've got. And it takes them time to adjust. And then it goes back down to poor quality and they got to adjust again. And so it's this constant up and down. And that's really an issue more like when you're talking like, or even 3 days as opposed to one, like 1 day as opposed to a half day, that difference is minuscule, but you're still going to see results, from doing a day versus twice a day. But then
just don't let it get cumbersome, if it's something that like it's a drag to have to move them twice a day, just move them once a day.
Exactly. It's just that whole fitting into your lifestyle piece. And then the other thing to just be careful of too is like if you're in that stage, and granted, moving them once every 3 days or whatever is a lot better than not moving them at all. But once you start getting into that, at least in this part of the country, into that like 3 day range of moving them, you're at risk of them like regrazing a plant that's already been grazed. And so that's how you can create like overgrazing, because like the plant, right, it gets eaten once, and then after 3 days it's actually starting to regrow a little bit, and so then the cows can sense that, and so they go back to that freshly like produced blade of grass right as the plant's like just starting to like put itself out there again,
using its root stores, and it's like starting to grow,
and then it just gets hit again, and then the health of that plant just goes down the tubes. And so like that overgrazing piece is something you got to be really careful of if you're in that, if you're at a similar level of recovery time that we've got here in central Missouri, and you're going on like 3+ day rotations, you just have to be super cognizant of that, about them regrazing a plant that's already been grazed. But more often is better.
You never want them to take a second bite.
Nope.
Bite. It's always one bite, and then you can move them.
Yep.
So
interesting. Now on grazing, winter grazing. Okay, this is something that watching you guys on Greg's channel, it's just amazing to me how much forage you guys still have left, like green forage, because you guys grow a lot of fescue out there. I know that's Greg's bread and butter. I can't talk right now. Bread and butter. What would you suggest to somebody that doesn't have fescue growing? Would you say, okay, go out there and seed it? Because for us, we put our last bale of hay today. We don't need to do it anymore because we have the grass growing back up. We only fed hay for 40 days. And I was thinking if we went out there and seeded fescue, we might not have to feed hay at all, maybe during the crazy storm that we had. But would that be something that you would suggest people to do that don't have it?
I would talk to some of the experts in your area, like maybe go to the NRCS, see if other people are growing fescue in in your local area. If it can grow, if Kentucky 31 fescue can grow in your area, it's an excellent grass. Yeah, for the wintertime, grazing stockpile.
The only thing is like, there's a couple things, but the only thing is like with the Kentucky 31, the reason why it's so hardy and stockpiles so well is because there's a toxic endophyte, which means like there's a fungal symbiont in the plant that's toxic to the cattle, and Greg's cattle are adapted to it after years of culling and whatnot. So like if you had a herd that was not adjusted to it and you planted a ton of it and then they start eating it, you're going to see a lot of cattle get fescue toxicity like right off the bat, which is not something to freak out about. It's just something that you're going to have to deal with. If that's
it's not really a factor in the wintertime. It's the summertime when the grass is growing that it really becomes a factor.
But it's a wonderful grass. The only thing also that I'd be careful of too is like you already touched on it too, is you should just figure out like what's growing in your area and if people can grow it. And what Greg says all the time is like you should really be concentrating on grazing what's growing in your road ditch in front of your farm. And so here, like Kentucky 31 grape grows in the road ditch. And so it's something that we focus on. But yeah, it's a competitive
basically
advantage.
region specific to whether or not you should do that or not.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, like, seeding something is just like another thing that you got to do as far as like instead of grazing what you already have. But granted, if it's something that grows in your area, it's really cheap. Like the seed is really cheap.
I think it's the cheapest seed you can buy, at least in this area. It's the
Yeah.
cheapest kind of seed you can buy.
So yeah, once it's in there, it's in there.
Yeah, that's another thing to be wary of too. Is so here in Greg's situation in the wintertime, since we're grazing this stockpile, we're beating the crap out of it. I mean, we're taking it down to 2 inches. Really putting some pressure on it, and that allows in the summertime other species to kind of come up and mix in with the fescue. Because if you don't do something to kind of set it back, it's going to just take over the farm. Like if you're not getting the animal impact that you need, it easily just clogs out other plants. Because what it does, it has this big sod, which in the wintertime, that's what keeps the cattle up. But what in the summertime, it'll choke out. It gets so strong and it chokes out a lot of other species.
If it's not
beaten back, and you don't want to do that in the summertime because that's when the end of fight toxin is really present, especially in that lower 2 to 3 inches. That's where it's really heavy. So you never want to be taking the fescue down that low in the summertime. But in the wintertime, as the cold, goes on and on, the grass is exposed to the cold longer and longer. That level, exactly, that end of fight level just goes down and down and down. And so it becomes way more palatable. And that's when you can, take it down a little bit.
That's the huge advantage of Kentucky 31 is the grazing in the wintertime. Yep. I mean, it's just a massive competitive advantage.
In the summertime, it's not the best grass.
It really is
like, there's a lot better forages to be grazing in the summertime. But since it has such an advantage in the wintertime, that's why, we love it so much.
Yeah. Yep.
And then the big thing that Greg pushes is unrolling the hay bales. And I've seen arguments go like crazy whether or not to do it or not do it. I don't have a bale unroller yet. I have to go up to see you guys and get it. I actually just found out that Greg's starting to ship them, and I talked to Amber over at Reject Ranch, and we're setting that up.
Yep.
It's going to be great because right now I am pushing hay bales.
Reject Ranch.
There we go. Yeah, no, right now I'm pushing hay bales to unroll them, and that's not too fun. But would you tell people it's worth it?
Yes, I like 100. Like for most people, I would say 100%. It's worth unrolling your hay versus putting in a bale ring for sure. The only situation where you can't do it is if you have a ton of snow, because it doesn't, like the unroller won't work if there's 2 feet plus of snow.
But if you blade the snow away, then you can
with your tractor. Yeah, you could do it. Yeah, I mean, outside of like extremes like that, or I mean, I would 100% advocate for unrolling hay for a number of reasons. But we can get into it. But I guess the biggest thing to keep in mind is like there is no such thing as wasted hay ever. So it's just hay that's not consumed by the cattle. So
something is going to come
along and consume it.
And that something is going to do huge wonders for your farm. That's going to be earthworms or soil microbes. The litter that gets left behind, that's going to be mixed with cow urine, cow manure. I mean, that's a tasty treat for an old earthworm, that they're going to gobble up on that and they're going to grow you some soil.
And the reason why Greg advocates for it so hard is because like he figured it out sort of on his own, where he was just like, happened to unroll hay bales one time and was like, holy crap, there's a strip of grass that came up in the spring that's like way better than everything else in the area. And that was the spot that he had unrolled the hay. And so he's like, well, I just got to start doing this. Like this is, and so way before the bale unroller, I mean, he was doing stuff like driving a metal spike through the middle of the bale and hooking it with log chains on the back of his Toyota. Yeah. And then like it would bend by the time like he finished unrolling it. So he had to go find a tree and bend it back straight. Like that's the kind of stuff he was doing before he actually had an unroller. And also like kind of stuff he did when he had no money.
Exactly. You gotta be creative.
Yeah.
One time he was going down a hill with a bale, and then he's, he could feel the weight that he's pulling it, and all of a sudden the chain came off and he felt it go loose. And it's in the dark, and he doesn't have his lights on. And he's got this little red Toyota, and he's heading straight for the creek. And he has to decide, do I go left or do I go right? Takes a sharp left and bam, right into the side of his truck. It almost rolled his truck over. The truck went and then back down, and it stopped the bale. The truck didn't go rolling into the creek, but he chose the wrong way.
Yeah,
so.
but anyway,
yeah,
I would, yeah. I mean, it's really just the fact that not only does your soil benefit from it, and you grow more grass as a result of it, but when you unroll hay like that, you have way more space for everybody, especially with a herd of our size. You have way more space for everybody to eat. Whereas like everybody can line up on a bale that's unrolled, and calves, like heifers, full-grown cows, bulls, like everybody's able to eat at the same time. Versus if you have them in bale rings, I mean, yeah, you can only have so many animals trying to eat at one point. So the dominant animals are going to get what they want, and everybody else is going to sort of get kicked to the wayside. So, yeah, there's just a lot of advantages to it.
And the big, like you said, the big thing to consider is it's not waste. That's like what a huge
argument against
turn off for people is like, oh, you're wasting all that hay, but you can't think of it like that.
Yeah,
you got to think of it as you're doing good.
And obviously when it's super wet, right, you're going to be like wasting more of it. As in, when you unroll it and it's incredibly wet, the first thing they do, I don't know if it happens with you, but for us, when we unroll hay, the entire mob basically gets on the hay and starts running and walking like down on top of the like strip. Like they don't just sit there and like eat it and like, oh, I'm not going to step on my food. It's like, no, I'm going to walk on top of the hay all the way down. And so if it's super wet and you unroll a whole bale and just like leave it there, they walk on it and then there's nothing to eat. And so what we do when it's incredibly wet is we'll unroll a chunk of the bale, fork it into little piles, and then they sort of group around it and eat it.
It's kind of like a bunch of mini bale
rings. And so we get more consumption that way when it's incredibly wet. But usually what we do is just unroll it, and the first 40 feet or less sometimes is sometimes thick, depending on if the bale's been sitting for a while. And so we'll just fork that out to make sure that it doesn't kill any grass. And then the rest of it, I mean, it's usually thin enough that,
and they'll eat most of it.
Yeah, and they'll eat most of it. And really, and ideally, Greg would like them to consume like 70% of it and leave 30% of that hay just sort of sprinkled around over the ground. If they cleaned it up, he'll usually think like, oh, we should have given them more hay, because it means they just consumed, like just vacuumed the whole thing up. But granted, if you give them an incredibly high quality bale,
they just
like it doesn't matter how much hay you put out, like they'll just vacuum it up. So yeah,
they can tell when it's good hay.
Yeah, and we're starting to be able to tell when it's super good hay. But anyway,
so Isaac, you just graduated high school in 2019, right?
Yep,
so that'd make you right around 20 years old.
Yeah, I'll be turning 20 in April.
Okay. Yeah. And Ben, you are how old?
I'm 24. I graduated from college in 2019. So we're like 4 years apart, almost exactly. Yeah.
So
I'll turn 25.
Oh, wow. Okay. So right now, the average age of farmers in the United States is around, I believe it's 67 years old, 65, 67.
Yeah.
Where do you see this regenerative agriculture space going? Do you see it as a big opportunity for a lot of younger people to get involved in agriculture and start making their own business out of it?
Absolutely, 100%. I think, and there's a lot of people that talk about this, but the whole low capital, low startup cost, getting into it, that's how we're going to get younger people like, Ben and I and yourself to get into, regenerative agriculture and get their feet, planted and get their ball rolling. If you look at like commodity agriculture, a single grain bin costs like $250,000 just to set up, or like a confinement chicken house, same cost, starting out as a young individual, you just can't afford that and make that work and make yourself a living. That's just kind of common sense. And so there's a lot of young people and people like our age, that are finding out about this regenerative agriculture and really seeing it as a way for themselves and others to get into agriculture and do good, for the environment as well. I think like the social media has such a huge impact on that because, our generation has kind of grown up around social media. We're familiar with it. And so we're able to connect on a different level that past generations they haven't really, grown up with. And so that's going to be huge for, this whole space and everything that's going on there too. So
yeah, it's like, even if, I mean, like for me, I always get so caught up in like the like lofty level goal of like where the whole regenerative movement is sort of bringing society. But if you just ignore all of that and you just think about like what would you rather be doing? You know what I mean? Like, would you rather be like running around in like, chest deep grass, like moving like super happy animals all day? Or would you rather like, be driving like a manure spreader or like, like a feed truck all day? Like, it's just, to me, that just makes no sense. Even if you weren't into the whole like ecosystem repairing, like good for the land, like type deal, if you were just purely in like, how am I going to make money and how am I going to like live like a healthy, happy life? It's like, there's no comparison in my opinion. But I mean, I guess it's like there's always people who are into whatever, but I think the vast majority of people would find it way more appealing regardless of the greater good that it ends up doing.
It's funny because like everybody that I've met that has caught the bug, that I would call it, just goes headfirst in. It's not, there's like, once you like get that inside of you, like you see the potential of it, I mean, it just gets going and going, and you get fired up and you fire other people up and other people fire you up, and it's just awesome.
Yeah.
And it's like
really nice.
The people that have,
no, finish what you're saying.
Yeah. Like the people that have like reservations, they haven't caught the bug because they haven't, like understand it fully. If I feel like if anybody understands the full implications of it, there's just like a no-brainer. Like, it's common sense, it just makes so much sense. So
I'm 27 years old, and most of the people that I've talked to in this space are 50, 60 plus, and that's who we learn from. So it's really nice to be able to connect with younger people and see that, hey, we're not the only ones doing this that are a little bit younger. And it's cool to see, we'll see where this takes us. And let me ask you this last question, all right? Each of you like separate answers. What's the number one thing that you've learned from Greg Judy?
Oh man,
no, it's a little tough one.
I this before.
Yeah, I know. It's let me think. The number one thing. Oh, I got one. Okay.
Watch it deal with farming.
I would say like the number one thing would be like always be questioning, like healthily always be questioning what you're doing. Because like if you you held up Greg's book, right? So if that's that was the first book, but it was published in like 2000 something, 2003, 2005. But regardless, like that book, right, has a lot of like applicable and awesome information in it. However, like there's a huge piece of it that is just completely missing from that book. And it's because Greg is constantly evolving and constantly questioning, like, am I doing this the right way? Could there be a better way that we either move the cattle, or we do mineral for the cattle, or we do water systems for the cattle, or like a better way to market this or that or whatever? And so he's always like scheming and thinking about that kind of stuff. Like, it's not like he's gotten married to an identity of how he's doing something. He just wants to be successful at this whole cattle like regenerative thing, and it doesn't really matter to him how he gets it done, which is a reflection on us, as in like he really values when we're questioning him and asking like, could we do it this way instead of that way? And that's come to like a lot of success for the business as well as like us and whatnot. So I would just say, regardless of what kind of path you are in life, even if it's not even regenerative agriculture, like even if you're successful, like always have that sort of like healthy questioning. Like, you don't want to be constantly second guessing yourself, but always just be thinking about, like, man, is there a better way that I could be doing this, or along those lines. So yeah, just always keep your mind open to new things.
That's a good one.
Grazing, your turn.
All right, that's another. That wasn't what I was going to.
Okay, I was about to say.
I think what I say I've learned the most from him is, in anything that you're doing, it's all about the relationships that you make. Greg's whole marketing strategy and his whole business is wrapped around, his passion for this and passion for, inspiring other people and building these other. You look at his YouTube channel. I mean, he's just like doing it for the benefit of others. It's not like he's doing it to like boost himself up or anything. He's trying to teach others and teach people the right way of doing things. And that's reflected both on his YouTube and in real life. Like we get to see him in real life, and it doesn't matter. Like it's not even like with people just in regenerative agriculture. We'll go out to eat and he'll see people that he like hasn't seen in 20 years. Oh yeah, making conversation, and he like remembers like things about people. And like he's really good at making like that personal level. Getting that relationship with people, and it really helps him in his business and his life and everything. So that's a super cool thing that I've picked up from him. But yeah.
Wow, that's really awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for coming on. If people want more of you, because I'm sure they will, how do they find you guys?
Greg Judy, Regenerative Rancher. If you look at Greg's YouTube channel, we're in that probably like every third video or whatever.
Yep.
But as far as our personal stuff, we both have Instagrams.
Mm-hmm.
Mine's on the Graze, and
mine's Isaac Tappenden, no underscore, all lowercase.
And I've got a YouTube channel. It's just my name, Ben Hawley, and that content over there is exclusively this live stream that we do on Instagram every Sunday night. So if people are interested in hearing us talk kind of like this, you can
we just talk on and on.
You can look at it on my YouTube channel or on the Graze. We do that every Sunday night. So yeah,
chewing the cud.
Yeah.
So what's the plan for you guys after you guys finish up with Greg? Any idea yet?
It's still a ways off. And generally the way that it, like Greg will sort of put out the bat signal, so to speak, right? Like around the fall of like the year that we're going to be leaving.
This fall.
And so like this coming fall is when he'll sort of, put out a video about us like personally and be like reaching out to like his connections and stuff like that about like, hey, they're looking to do this or that or whatever. But I think at least for like I can only really speak generally because we don't have any like specifics, but like for me, I think that the next step is working as like a manager for somebody else, like whether that's working with somebody or working underneath somebody or whatever, but taking on some like more responsibility and just more reps and learning, making that gap smaller, like as I was talking about earlier. So yeah, like working as a manager for somebody.
That's the same direction I'm kind of headed.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, generally, like I'm super interested in what this whole thing, like regenerative agriculture, looks like at scale. So I think like, like Greg's operation and smaller is always going to have a place, like local food and like local small to like medium sized seed stock production and beef, lamb, pork, chicken, whatever is always going to have a place in society. And I think it's growing. But if this is going to become like a food system solution on a national level or even a global level, there's got to be some sort of element of scale. And so I'd be just super curious to see what this kind of operation looks like at 1,000 head or plus, so that's sort of the direction I'm trying to head in. But at this point, just trying to be a manager after the fact. But yeah,
that's what I'd like to be, is something like you said, to increase the responsibility and the learning, but then also have kind of the decrease that gap, that's what I would say.
Yeah,
maybe somewhere. I don't even want to say that because I'm open to any, going anywhere, because like who knows the experiences you'll learn, in a different place in the country or whatever. So yeah,
we might have to have you guys come down to Texas for a visit and see what we can do.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
Well, thank you guys so much. Really, really appreciate you guys coming on. You guys are a wealth of knowledge, and you guys have an opportunity that I hope you guys really take advantage of, because I know a lot of people are jealous of it.
Yeah, I'm trying to squeeze that lemon. Yeah, get all we can out of it.
Yeah.
Well, until next time, guys, thank you very much, and we'll catch you on the next video.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Thank you so much. It's been good.